let's move on to something that perhaps youngsters are debating these days. And it's also happening in America, legalization of cannabis. And you've written about this. This is a hot subject, and especially because a lot of false equivalences are drawn to, Shiva and how he used to consume cannabis and things like that.
You're going to get me into trouble on this question. You will get me into trouble. So, I mean, I have written a column on this, but I'm not too sure as to whether we should be discussing this.
No, let's talk about it in terms of policy, but not in terms of historical usages and things like that. I won't get you into trouble. So my question directly to you is, should cannabis be legalized in India? Because so many other countries have started to do it. And also, since you can give us a perspective, how did ancient Bharat treat consumption of cannabis?
Okay. Should I answer your question first and then go into the details? The simple answer, it's a one-word answer to your question. Yes, it should be legalized. But obviously, that's a point of view. That's an opinion. Right. I'm sure there will be many who will argue with my opinion. Now, coming to the historical perspective on this, if we go back into our own legends, the legend has it that it was the shade of a tall cannabis plant that brought Lord Shiva relief from the blazing sun. And he was curious, so he chewed some of its leaves, and he felt so invigorated that he adopted its usage. Hence the use of cannabis in Shiva worship. Now, the plant and its forms are known by various names around the world: marijuana, Mary Jane, weed, pot, hemp, grass. In fact, I'm told that there are more than 1,000 terms, including lots of slang, for the humble cannabis, a plant that can be used in various forms. So you can imagine, I mean, something that has been given 1,000 odd names, how popular it must be. Yeah. But in India, the most common avatars are the so-called trinity of Bhang, Ganja, and Charas. Now, Bhang, of course, is a paste which is derived from grinding cannabis leaves and stems together, while Ganja or weed is more potent and is made from dried flower buds of the plant. And Charas, which is the most intoxicating amongst the three forms, is a resin that is obtained by rubbing the cannabis flowers for hours. The longer, the better. It is often called hashish. And it was the Nizari Ismaili militants of 11th century Persia who smoked it. And that's why they began to be called hashishin, which is the etymological root of the word assassin. Now, the earliest references to cannabis you can find from the Vedas. The Atharva Veda refers to it as one of the 5 kingdoms of herbs that release us from anxiety. Its uses have been mentioned in the Sushrut Samhita, the Bhav Prakash. There is, I think, a reference of it even in the Ashtadhyayi of Panini, which reinforces the view that cannabis was known to Indians 2,300 years ago. During the 10th century, it was called the food of the gods. 500 years later, its virtues were listed as astringency, heat, inspiration, and the capacity to eliminate wind and phlegm. In the 16th century, we have a Sanskrit play depicting 2 people quarreling before a judge. Before passing a verdict, the judge demands a payment for his decree and is readily offered bhang. The Raj Vallabh, which is a 17th century text, goes on to equate it with Amrit, the nectar of life. So for centuries, bhang has been a symbol of festivity and hospitality in India. No marriage, coronation, or harvest has been complete without it. As a holy staple, thandai is made by boiling a mixture of milk, sugar, cannabis, poppy seeds, and pepper, ginger, cloves, cardamom, and dry fruits, almond, nutmeg, rosebuds, and so on and so forth. But bhang is even found in pakoras, halwa, and pedas. Sadhus have used it from time immemorial as a means to alter spiritual consciousness. Now, rarely can you visit the banks of the Ganga without coming across a sadhu and his chilam, which is a conical smoking pipe made of clay. So cannabis has been indispensable historically, even in war. Indian folk songs from the 12th century talk about bhang as the drink of warriors. Soldiers would take a swig to eliminate any fear or panic. One such story describes the frightened soldiers of Guru Gobind Singh when he was confronted by a wild elephant with a sword that had been pierced into his trunk. Eventually, one of the soldiers consumed bhang, which gave him the courage to slip under the elephant and kill it. So, given the fact that we have such ancient connections with cannabis, I wonder why this herb has sparked so much debate and outrage in recent times. I mean, we have Canada, Mexico, South Africa, Uruguay, Georgia, and I think some parts of Australia, and I think some of the states, 18 odd states of the US, have legalized the recreational use of cannabis. Now, this was possibly prompted by an earlier study a few years ago, which found that alcohol and nicotine were far riskier than cannabis on a so-called margin of exposure basis. So the question in my mind really is that why don't we simply legalize cannabis and tax it like alcohol and tobacco? After all, in India, we earned a whopping 1.75 lakh crores in the year 2019-20 from taxes on alcohol. The Indian Exchequer collects more than 53,000 crores each year from tobacco products. Now, we don't ban those products. I mean, in some states we have prohibition, but we don't ban those products nationally. We simply make them very expensive for consumers. And currently, the so-called Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act frames India's regulations around cannabis. And while the act prohibits the sale and use of cannabis resin and its flowers, it permits the use of the seeds, stems, and leaves. So in effect, bhang is legal while Ganja and Charas are illegal. But does that really make sense? Because think about this logically. The alcohol content of beer, wine, vodka, and whiskey, they vary widely. For beer, it's around 5%, wine is at 12%, vodka is approximately 40%, and whiskey is around 40 or 45%. But do we make one legal and the other illegal because of the potency?
Yeah.
So the way I like to really think about this entire debate, there was this judge, this law professor who was also a member of the Mississippi legislature. And he was once asked about his position on whiskey. His name was Noah Sweat. And he gave the most beautiful reply. He said, if when you say whiskey, you mean the devil's brew, the poison scourge, the bloody monster that defiles innocence, dethrones reason, then my friend, I am opposed to it with every fiber of my being. However, if by whiskey you mean the oil of conversation, the philosophic wine, the elixir of life, the ale that is consumed when good fellows get together, then my friend, I'm absolutely and unequivocally in favor of it. Isn't it time for us to take an equally balanced view on something like this? I mean, so I'll just leave it there.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.